Frickin' worked! I haven't felt this much relief in a very long time. I think that finally, after everything, after all the new parts, after new LCDs, after lots of encouragement and troubleshooting from you guys, I think it's finally working, and this here is proof positive. This was a non-supported print with no raft, just flat on the plate, hit go, and it seems to have worked perfectly. Very minor, couple tiny little separated layers in there, but very, very minuscule, very difficult to see. This looks fantastic. I'm so happy with this. And the most important thing is that this was the print that was failing in the last video that I showed, with all of the round pieces that had just been pulled off the plate. Now, I don't know exactly what the solution was. I tried multiple things before this print. The first of which was Phrozen sent me brand new circuit boards for inside the machine, which I replaced both of them. They sent me another new LCD screen, which I also replaced. And I was also chatting with a gentleman who gave me the recommendation to, especially on these big prints, to increase the bottom lift distance and lift distance, because as the FEP warms up, it becomes a little more elastic. And if the distance is not far enough, if it's not being pulled far enough away from the FEP, then the FEP might just be staying attached to it and eventually just pulling it off the plate. Honestly, I think it's a combination of everything. My exposure times are working a lot better. This is 8-second layers with monocure rapid gray, and it looks great. So I could even try lowering that by a couple more seconds to see how it works. And all the smaller things I printed turned out great and weren't being pulled off the plate. But I think the main culprit for the big ones was that bottom lift and lifting distance. And it makes sense too, because if the FEP is becoming more elastic as it's printing, the print comes down and it pulls it up, and it's not pulling it up far enough, that FEP is just sticking to it and never detaching. And if it's never detaching, it could just be wearing and wearing and wearing on the attachment to the plate and eventually pulling it off. So as you saw in the last video, there were multiple fails that were all around the same spot. So for this particular print, I used a Z-lift distance of 15 millimeters. I'm going to try and come down on that a little bit, because that lift distance does greatly affect your printing speed. The Z-axis on the transform doesn't move quickly by default, so things you can try to do to speed up your print time is raise that lifting speed or lower the lifting distance, as long as you're not doing anything too big that would be affected by it. If you're just printing a plate full of miniatures, you can probably lower that lifting distance down significantly and print very, very quickly. For example, for this size print, changing your lift distance from 10 millimeters to 15 millimeters adds an extra 4.5 hours at the settings that I was using, which is 8-second layers and 0.05 layer height. But none of that time matters if your print just doesn't work in the first place because your lift distance is too short. So you're gonna have to experiment with it and figure it out how it works for you. But that's a tangent. The main thing I wanted to show you guys is that I've gotten a successful print, and it looks great, and it was flat on the bed with no supports. And at this point, even though I hesitate to say it, I think that every issue that I've talked about on this channel so far has been solved, which I can't even express how good it feels to say that. I know a lot of my videos have been critical of the machine, and I've talked about only the issues that I've been having. I've tried to stay objective during all this time, knowing that a lot of it was user error, and knowing that even though support was sometimes slow, Phrozen was actively trying to help by sending new parts and giving me options for how to fix it. So it feels really good to be able to say that the machine is now working. Obviously, I'm going to put it through the ringer, do some additional big parts, and make sure that this wasn't just some fluke, but I don't feel like it is. There's nothing wrong with this part, whereas even on the parts that worked for me before, there were minor errors, or they had rafts and supports and still didn't come out perfect. This here is, I guess, the ultimate benchmark for me. This is the print that I've been trying to get to work for the last several months and have been constantly tweaking and changing settings and exposure times and bottom layer times and pull distance, no, not distance. Distance is the one thing I didn't try, ironically. But the speed, the pull speed from the plate, new LCDs, different kinds of resins. Like I've experimented so much to try and get to this point. I'm happy to be holding this dude in my hand right now. And as a by the way, if anyone is wondering what this piece is, this is the Armored Gargantuan from Rocket Pig Games. I chose this because it had several different layers to it, from some detailed work, in the face and teeth, and all the detailed skulls at the bottom, to all the different points of articulation that had to be done. And even, you can't really see it, but the skin on the back here, has some good texture to it. And I really just wanted a benchmark for the printer. As I said earlier, I wanted to print something that didn't require any supports, that was big, that had a bunch of different things to it. And for me, like this not only that, but it's freaking cool too. If you're a resin printer, if you have the Transform, every month on their Patreon, they do deluxe models, epic models, a bunch of different stuff that you can support them for. And if you're like me and you hate dealing with supports, you can get really cool stuff from them that is literally slap on the plate and hit go. As long as you got your machine tuned. But Dungeon Printer, I only come to your channel to see you fail. What do I do? Well, there you go. While I was on vacation over the holiday, I decided to do a 10-day print on my new CR10 V2. My fail-safes were that, one, Kira lied to me and told me that it would take significantly less filament than it did. But even if it did take more filament, because I wasn't quite sure about that number, I expected it would take quite a bit more. But my fail-safe was that the machine comes with a sensor, so when the filament runs out, it shuts off. And I thought, hey, at least I'll let it go, and then when I come back, if it's out of filament, I can just put it in and start the machine again, and it'll keep going. Well, here's a photo of what happened. The eSun filament that I was using, when it came to the end of the spool, they had bent the filament so that the spool could feed itself easier when rolling. Well, that bend was enough for it to snag against the outside of the place that was supposed to detect if I was out of filament or not, which caused the feed mechanism to grind it completely off, which caused the machine to keep going and keep going and keep going, thinking there was filament in it, and it finished the print without any filament left in it. So, all you Mandalorian fans, feel my pain. This is what could have been. So there you go. There's your video dose of Dungeon Printer fails, just so I can stay on brand and not have too uplifting of a video. I do think this is somewhat salvageable. I can find about the right area, slice it, and print the rest of the helmet, so I don't think it's completely wasted. That was my first week-plus long print, and maybe it was wishful thinking, but I was hoping to come home to a fully completed Mandalorian helmet. But that's all for now. Leave you with one more shot of this guy here, because I've been putting it in your face and holding onto it and hugging it. I'll probably snuggle with it tonight when I go to sleep, which, you know what, it's worth it. I'll do it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. hopefully this means we can do some more cool prints and cool videos on this thing now. And hopefully we can start to get into the core of what I wanted this channel to be.
All those years ago, when I was such a young and spirited lad, when my whole life was ahead of me and all future looked bright.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for supporting me through all my not so positive videos. And we'll see you next time.
Fare thee well.
Holy shit. It actually worked. It worked. It worked. Are you excited? It worked. It worked. It worked.